was a Friday night in late October, and the city lights shimmered like scattered diamonds against the dark sky. Inside Le Jardin, one of Manhattan's most talked-about restaurants, the air hummed with soft jazz, clinking glasses, and the low murmur of well-dressed guests. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over white tablecloths, and the scent of seared duck and truffle oil drifted from the open kitchen. Everything about the place whispered luxury, except for what was about to happen at table 12. At that table sat a young woman, barely 22, draped in a designer dress that probably cost more than most people made in a month. She wasn't alone. 3 friends surrounded her, laughing loudly, phones out, snapping photos for their stories. It was her birthday, and she'd insisted on celebrating here, not because she loved the food, but because it was the kind of place people posted about. The kind of place that proved you'd made it. She'd been waiting nearly 40 minutes for her main course, a truffle risotto she'd ordered with extra parmesan, no parsley, and a side of roasted asparagus. The kitchen had gotten backed up. The host had explained politely when she'd first complained. But now, as her friends finished their plates and the empty space in front of her grew more noticeable, her patience wore thin. Across the room, a waiter moved quietly between tables. He was in his late 20s with tired eyes but a steady hand. His name tag read Matteo, and his black uniform was crisp despite the long shift. He'd been working double shifts all week, days at a community college tutoring math, nights here on his feet until past midnight. His sister was in the hospital again, and the bills kept piling up. Every tip mattered. Every minute counted. He'd checked on table 12 twice already, offering water refills and polite reassurances. But the young woman barely looked at him. When he approached a third time, she cut him off before he could speak. "Where is my food?" she demanded, voice sharp enough to turn heads at nearby tables. "I've been sitting here forever. Do you even know who I am?" Matteo kept his tone calm. "I'm very sorry for the delay, ma'am. The kitchen is running behind, but your risotto is coming right out." "Right out?" she scoffed, rolling her eyes. "It's been right out for 20 minutes. This is ridiculous. I don't come here to be ignored." Her friends exchanged glances, half amused, half uncomfortable. One of them whispered, "Chill, it's just dinner." But the birthday girl wasn't listening. Just then, another server placed a plate of risotto in front of her. Steam curled from the creamy rice, flecked with black truffle shavings. It looked perfect, but it was too late. "You took so long, I'm not even hungry anymore," she snapped, shoving the plate away, except she didn't just shove it. In a sudden burst of anger, she grabbed the edge and flung it across the table. The plate didn't just slide, it flew. Rice and sauce splattered through the air like paint from a brush, landing with a wet smack across Matteo's chest and shoulder. A chunk of truffle stuck to his collar. The restaurant fell silent. Even the jazz seemed to pause. Matteo froze. Not out of shock, but because he knew any reaction, anger, tears, even a sharp word, could cost him his job. He'd seen coworkers fired for less. So he did the only thing he could. He took a slow breath, reached for a clean napkin from his pocket, and began wiping his shirt as calmly as if he'd spilled coffee on himself. "I'm sorry you're upset," he said quietly, voice steady. "Would you like me to have the kitchen prepare a fresh plate?" The young woman stared at him, her face flushed, not with shame but with something closer to defiance. "Whatever," she muttered, turning back to her friends like nothing had happened. "Let's just get the check." But it wasn't nothing. A diner at the next table had already pulled out their phone. Within minutes, a shaky 15-second clip was uploaded to social media. "Rich girl throws food at waiter like he's trash." By the time Matteo clocked out at 11 p.m., the video had 50,000 views. He walked home that night through the cool autumn air, his uniform still stained, his shoes aching. He didn't check his phone until he got to his tiny apartment in Queens. When he did, it buzzed nonstop. Messages from strangers, some angry, some supportive. One read, "Hope you're okay. That wasn't your fault." Another, "People like her think money makes them better than everyone else." He texted his sister, "Long night, but I'm fine." He didn't tell her what happened. She had enough to worry about. Back at the restaurant, the manager pulled the young woman aside as she tried to leave without paying. "You'll need to settle the bill," he said firmly. She rolled her eyes again but handed over her black card without another word. As she stepped into the waiting town car, one of her friends giggled. "That was kind of wild," she said. The birthday girl smirked. He should have been faster. Honestly, it's his job. She didn't see the manager watching her from the doorway, arms crossed. He'd worked in hospitality for 20 years. He'd seen entitled guests before, but never someone so young act with such casual cruelty. He made a mental note. No more reservations for that name. Meanwhile, across the city in a penthouse overlooking Central Park, a man in his 50s sat alone in a quiet study. His name wasn't widely known outside boardrooms and tech conferences, but his company powered half the apps on people's phones. He'd built his empire from a garage startup, working 18-hour days while eating instant noodles. He remembered what it felt like to be invisible, to be treated like you didn't matter. His phone buzzed. A notification from a news alert. Billionaire's daughter causes scene at Le Jardin. He clicked it. Watched the video. Watched it again. His face didn't change, but his knuckles whitened around the phone. He didn't yell. He didn't call his daughter right away. Instead, he poured a glass of water, sat back in his chair and stared out at the city lights. By sunrise, the video had spread like wildfire. What started as a shaky clip on one person's feed had exploded across every major platform. News sites picked it up by 7 a.m., not just local blogs, but national headlines. Heiress humiliates waiter in viral outburst, one read. Another. Privilege on full display at Manhattan hotspot. The comments sections filled fast, some defending the young woman. She was just frustrated. But most furious. That could have been my brother, one user wrote. People act like service workers aren't human. Matteo woke up to his phone buzzing nonstop. He'd barely slept, tossing and turning, replaying the moment in his head. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the plate flying, heard the silence that followed. He checked his messages, dozens from co-workers, old classmates, even people he hadn't spoken to in years. Most were kind. You handled that like a pro. Hope you're okay. But a few were darker. Hope someone teaches her a lesson. Rich brats like that need to be put in their place. He deleted those quickly. He didn't want hate, not directed at her, not at anyone. He just wanted to go back to work and forget it happened. But forgetting wasn't an option. When he arrived at the restaurant for his afternoon shift, the manager pulled him into the back office before he even clocked in. You're not working tonight, the manager said gently. Take the weekend off, paid. Matteo frowned. Why? I didn't do anything wrong. You didn't, the manager said, rubbing his temples. But the owners are worried. People are showing up just to take pictures. Some are asking for your table. Others are demanding to speak to her if she comes back. It's chaos. We need things to cool down. Matteo nodded slowly. He understood, but it still stung. This job was his lifeline. Without those hours, his sister's next round of treatment might get delayed. Still, he thanked the manager and walked out into the gray morning light, hands in his pockets, feeling strangely untethered. Meanwhile, across town, the young woman slept in, unaware of the storm brewing online. When she finally woke up around noon, her phone was flooded, but not with birthday wishes. Her group chats were blowing up. One friend sent a screenshot of a trending hashtag, Yo Risotto Rage. Another forwarded a news article with her face blurred, but her dress unmistakable. She scrolled through the comments, her stomach tightening. At first, she laughed it off. People have nothing better to do, she muttered, tossing her phone aside. But then she saw a post from a popular influencer. This is why no one likes the ultra-rich. They treat people like furniture. Another showed a side-by-side, her in her designer dress versus a photo of a real waiter, exhausted after a 12-hour shift, captioned, Who deserves respect? For the first time, doubt crept in. Not guilt, just discomfort. She called her publicist, who answered on the first ring. Okay, we need damage control, the publicist said, voice tight. We're drafting a statement. You'll post it this afternoon. Apologize for the misunderstanding, say you were stressed, blah blah. And for God's sake, stay off social media. But the young woman didn't want to apologize. Not really. She hadn't done anything that bad, had she? People threw tantrums all the time. Why was this such a big deal? She didn't know that her father had already seen everything. He hadn't posted anything. He hadn't called reporters. But he'd spent the morning doing something far more unsettling. Digging. He pulled up old security footage from family events, reviewed her recent credit card statements, even spoke quietly with her former teachers. What he found wasn't just one spoiled moment. It was a pattern. Cancelled reservations without notice. Rude comments to staff at their private club. A string of unpaid internships where assistants quit after weeks of being belittled. He sat in his study again, this time with a printed copy of the restaurant's employee handbook. He read the section on dignity and respect in the workplace. Then he looked at a photo on his desk, himself at 19, working nights at a diner, saving for community college. He remembered the regulars who never said thank you, who left pennies as tips, who acted like his time meant nothing. He closed his eyes. "I failed her," he whispered. Back in Queens, Mateo visited his sister at the hospital. She was sitting up in bed, flipping through a magazine, looking better than she had in weeks. She didn't know about the video, her phone was broken, and she'd been too tired to scroll anyway. "How was work?" she asked, smiling. "Quiet," he lied. "Same as always," she studied his face. "You look tired." "I'm fine," he said, squeezing her hand. "Just thinking about how I'm going to afford that new medication you need." She frowned. "Don't worry about that. I'll be back on my feet soon." He nodded, but inside he felt the weight pressing down. He'd been so close to saving enough. Now with reduced hours, it felt like starting over. That evening, as he walked home, a local news van pulled up beside him. A reporter jumped out, mic in hand. "Excuse me, are you the waiter from Le Jardin? Can we get a comment?" Mateo shook his head and kept walking. "No comment," he said firmly but politely. The reporter called after him. "Do you think she should apologize? Do you want her to lose her job?" Mateo stopped, turned slowly. "I don't want her to lose anything," he said, voice low but clear. "I just wish she'd seen me as a person. That's all." The clip went viral within the hour, not because it was dramatic, but because it was quiet, honest, and painfully human. People shared it with captions like, "This is the real story. He's asking for basic decency." Overnight, donations started pouring into a crowdfunding page someone had set up for his sister's medical bills. Strangers sent gift cards, care packages, even handwritten letters. One read, "My dad was a waiter too. Thank you for your dignity." Mateo didn't know what to do with all the kindness. He felt grateful but also overwhelmed. He wasn't looking for fame or money. He just wanted to do his job without being treated like he didn't matter. And then late that night, his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. But something made him pick up. "Hello?" he said. A calm older man's voice came through. "This is Robert Van Derlen. I'm the father of the young woman who caused that scene at your restaurant." Mateo's breath caught. He didn't speak. "I've seen the video," the man continued. "I've read what people are saying. And I want you to know what she did was unacceptable. Not just rude, wrong. And I intend to make it right." Mateo swallowed. "Sir, I don't want trouble. I just want to move on." "I know," the man said. "And I respect that. But moving on doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen. I'd like to meet you tomorrow. In person, no cameras, no press, just a conversation." Mateo hesitated. Part of him wanted to say no. But another part, the part that remembered his sister's worried eyes, the part that had wiped truffle sauce off his chest in silence, wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, someone in that world could understand. "Okay," he said finally. "Tomorrow." He hung up, heart pounding. Outside his window, the city hummed on, unaware of the quiet turning point happening in a small apartment in Queens. Tomorrow would bring something new, something unexpected. And for the first time in days, Mateo felt not fear, but a flicker of hope. The next afternoon, Mateo stood outside Le Jardin, hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets, watching the street. He'd worn his best slacks and a clean button-down. Nothing fancy, just neat. He hadn't slept much. Every time he closed his eyes, he kept replaying the phone call from the night before. The billionaire's voice had been calm, almost gentle, but there was something underneath it. Steel, maybe, or sorrow. Mateo couldn't tell which. He wasn't sure what to expect. Lawyers, a check, an awkward apology wrapped in legal fine print. He'd Googled the man once just out of curiosity. Saw photos of him at tech conferences, always in simple suits, never smiling much. Built his company from nothing. Known for being fair, even ruthless in business, but never flashy. That didn't match the daughter at all. At exactly 2 p.m., a black Rolls-Royce Phantom glided to the curb. It wasn't loud or showy, it just arrived like it belonged. The driver's door opened, and a man in a dark overcoat stepped out. No bodyguards, no assistants, just him. He was older than Mateo expected, late 50s maybe, with silver at his temples and lines around his eyes that spoke of long nights and hard choices. He walked with purpose, but not arrogance. When he saw Matteo, he stopped, nodded once, and held out his hand. "Thank you for meeting me," he said. His grip was firm, dry, and real. Matteo shook it. "I wasn't sure you'd come alone." "I don't believe in hiding behind people when I've got something to say face to face," the man replied. He glanced at the restaurant. "Mind if we talk somewhere quieter?" They walked a block to a small park tucked between brownstones. Autumn leaves crunched underfoot. They sat on a bench near a quiet fountain, the kind of place tourists never found. For a long moment, neither spoke. The billionaire just stared at his hands like he was gathering words. Finally, he said, "What my daughter did, it wasn't just rude. It was cruel. And it's on me." Matteo blinked. He'd expected excuses, blame shifting, maybe a kids these days speech. "Not this. She's been raised with everything," the man continued, voice low. "Private schools, vacations in places most people can't pronounce. A life where people jump when she says jump. I thought I was giving her the world, but I forgot to teach her how to see the people in it." He turned to Matteo. "You handled yourself with more grace than I've seen in boardrooms full of so-called leaders. And that shames me, because you didn't deserve any of that, not the disrespect, not the mess, not the attention." Matteo looked down. "I just wanted to do my job." "I know," the man said softly. "And that's why I'm here." He reached into his coat and pulled out a set of car keys. Not flashy, just sleek black with a small silver emblem. He held them out. "This is the key to that Rolls-Royce parked down the street," he said. "It's not a gift. It's a loan. You can drive it as long as you need, until you've saved enough to buy your own car, or until you feel like you've gotten back what was taken from you that night." Matteo stared at the keys like they were on fire. "I can't accept that," he said quickly. "It's too much. It's not charity," the man said firmly. "It's accountability. My daughter took your dignity in front of strangers. I can't give that back, but I can make sure you're not punished for her mistake. You've got bills, a sister who needs you. This car, it'll save you hours on the subway. It'll let you work more shifts, visit her more often. Think of it as borrowed time." Matteo hesitated. He thought of the hospital visits, the late nights walking home in the rain, the bus fare he counted every week. He thought of his sister's tired smile when he walked in the door. "But why?" he asked. "Why go this far?" The man sighed. "Because I was once where you are. Not a waiter, but close. I washed dishes in a diner while studying engineering. One night a customer threw a coffee cup at me because his eggs were cold. I didn't say a word, just cleaned it up. But I never forgot how it felt, like I wasn't human." He looked Matteo in the eye. "I swore if I ever had power, I'd use it to lift people up, not step on them. I failed my daughter by not teaching her that. But I won't fail to fix what she broke." Matteo felt something shift inside him. Not relief exactly, but a quiet kind of trust. This wasn't about money. It was about respect. "Okay," he said slowly. "But only if I earn it." The man smiled just a little. "Good, because I've got a condition." Matteo tensed. "What kind?" "I run a small program for kids in the Bronx, after-school tutoring, job prep, that sort of thing. I need someone who's been through real struggle to mentor them. Someone who knows what it's like to work 2 jobs and still show up with kindness. I want you to help. Not every day, just a few hours a week. The car stays yours as long as you do." Matteo thought about it. He'd always wanted to give back. He remembered the teacher who stayed late to help him with algebra, the neighbor who lent him bus fare when he was broke. Maybe this was his turn. "I'll do it," he said. The man nodded, then stood. "The car's unlocked. Keys are yours. And Matteo, thank you for not letting her win." They walked back to the restaurant together, not saying much. When they reached the Rolls-Royce, the man opened the passenger door and placed a small envelope on the seat. "Inside is a note with the program's address and schedule," he said, "and a prepaid phone, just in case. No tracking, no strings." Then he turned to leave. "Wait," Matteo called out. "What about your daughter?" The man paused. "She'll face consequences. Real ones, not just a PR apology. She'll work at a food bank, take financial literacy classes, and she'll write you a letter, by hand, no help, telling you she's sorry. Not because I made her, but because she finally understands why she should be." He gave a small, tired smile. "Some lessons take longer than others." With that, he walked away, hands in his pockets. disappearing into the afternoon crowd like any other man. Matteo stood there for a long time, keys in hand, heart pounding. He opened the car door. Leather seats, clean smell, quiet engine waiting. It felt surreal. But as he slid into the driver's seat, he didn't feel rich. He felt seen. He started the engine. It purred softly like a cat. He didn't drive off right away. Instead, he pulled out his phone and texted his sister. "Got a ride. Be there in 20. Then he pulled into traffic, not toward home but toward the hospital. Faster, smoother, with a little more hope than he'd had in weeks. The city blurred past the windows, but for the first time in a long time, Matteo didn't feel invisible. He felt like someone who mattered. And that was worth more than any car. The Rolls-Royce sat in the hospital parking lot like a quiet promise. It wasn't flashy, not with the windows tinted and the engine off, but it was there, dependable, ready. Matteo used it carefully, never speeding, never showing off. He drove his sister to her follow-up appointments, picked up groceries for their building's elderly neighbors, and even gave rides to co-workers when the subway broke down. The car became less about luxury and more about time. Time saved, time given, time reclaimed. At the same time, he started showing up at the community center in the Bronx every Tuesday and Thursday evening. The place was modest, peeling paint, mismatched chairs, a whiteboard with half-erased algebra problems. But the kids were sharp, hungry for someone to believe in them. Matteo didn't lecture. He just listened. He told them about working nights while studying, about choosing between bus fare and dinner, about how dignity isn't something you're given. It's something you hold on to. Even when the world tries to knock it loose, one teenager, a quiet girl with braces and a worn backpack, stayed after class one night. "You really drive that Rolls?" she asked, eyes wide. "I do," Matteo said. "But it's not mine. It's on loan." "Why would someone give you a Rolls-Royce?" she pressed. "Because someone finally saw me," he said simply. "And maybe he wanted to remind me that I'm worth seeing." She nodded like she understood. And maybe she did. Meanwhile, across the city, the young woman sat in a folding chair inside a crowded food bank in Brooklyn. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by a plain blue volunteer t-shirt and sneakers she'd never worn before. Her hands, once used to clutching champagne flutes, now packed boxes of canned beans and pasta. At first, she'd shown up late, arms crossed, scrolling on her phone between tasks. The coordinator, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, hadn't yelled. She'd just said, "If you're here, you're working." No exceptions. Slowly, grudgingly, the young woman began to pay attention. She saw mothers counting change to stretch a meal. She saw elderly men who walked miles just to get a warm lunch. One afternoon, an older woman handed her a crumpled photo of her grandson. "He's in the hospital," she said softly. "Like your friend, maybe?" The young woman froze. "My friend?" "The waiter," the woman said gently. "I saw the video. You hurt him, but you're here now. That means something." Tears pricked the young woman's eyes, not from shame but from something deeper. Recognition. For the first time, she wasn't looking down at people. She was looking at them. That night, she sat at her desk with a blank sheet of paper and a pen. No phone, no assistant. Just her and the silence. She wrote slowly, crossing out words, starting over. It took 3 tries before it felt real. "I'm sorry," she began. "Not because I got caught. Not because my dad made me, but because I saw your face after I threw that plate, and I realized I didn't see you. I saw a uniform, a job, an obstacle, and that was wrong." She wrote about how she'd never considered that the people serving her had lives just as full, just as fragile as hers. She wrote that she'd started volunteering not to fix her image, but to fix herself. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She just said she was trying. She sealed the letter in an envelope and handed it to her father without a word. He read it that night alone in his study. When he finished, he folded it carefully and placed it in his desk drawer, next to the photo of his younger self in that diner apron. A week later, Matteo received the letter. He read it in his apartment, the city lights flickering outside. He didn't cry, but his chest felt tight. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't magical. But it was honest. And honesty, he knew, was the first step toward change. Around the same time, news outlets began reporting a quiet shift. The young woman had quietly donated to the hospital where Matteo's sister was treated, enough to cover the remaining bills, with extra for others in similar situations. No press release, no fanfare, just a transaction, verified by hospital staff who confirmed the donation, came with one request. Don't tell anyone it was me. Matteo never told his sister the full story. He just said, someone helped out. She smiled and squeezed his hand. The world's not all bad, huh? No, he said. Not all. Back at the community center, Matteo started staying later. He helped a boy fill out his first job application. He showed another how to balance a checkbook. One evening, the coordinator pulled him aside. You've got a gift, she said. These kids trust you because you don't talk down to them. You've been there, Matteo shrugged. I'm just doing what someone once did for me. He thought about the billionaire not as a powerful man in a mansion, but as someone who remembered what it felt like to be unseen. That memory had sparked something. Not a grand gesture, but a chain reaction of small, human choices. The young woman, meanwhile, enrolled in a local college course, Introduction to Social Work. She sat in the back at first, head down, but gradually began asking questions. Her classmates didn't know who she was. To them, she was just another student trying to figure things out. And for the first time in her life, that felt like enough. One rainy Thursday, Matteo drove the Rolls to the food bank. Not to pick up anything, but because he'd heard the young woman was volunteering there. He didn't plan to speak to her. He just wanted to see if the rumors were true. He watched from across the street as she carried boxes under an umbrella, laughing with another volunteer. She looked tired but lighter, like a weight had been lifted. When she turned and saw him, she stopped. For a moment, they just looked at each other. No anger, no drama. Just two people who'd been through something and come out the other side. She gave a small, awkward wave. He nodded back. Then she went back to work and he drove away, not as a victim or a hero, but as someone who'd chosen to move forward. That night, he parked the Rolls in his usual spot and walked upstairs. His sister was asleep, but a note was taped to her door. Thanks for the ride today. You're the best, he smiled. The car was still just alone. But the respect, the understanding, that felt like his to keep, and in a city full of noise and speed, that quiet truth was more valuable than any fortune. 6 months had passed, and the city had moved on, as cities do. The viral video was now buried under newer scandals and flashier headlines. Most people had forgotten the truffle risotto, the black dress, the stunned silence in that upscale restaurant. But for two people, that night had become a turning point. Not the end of a story, but the beginning of something quieter, deeper. The young woman no longer lived in the penthouse. She'd moved into a small apartment near her college campus, paid for with part-time work at the food bank and a modest allowance tied to her grades and volunteer hours. Her phone buzzed less with party invites and more with study group texts and reminders about community outreach events. She still carried herself with confidence, but it was different now. Less about what she owned, more about what she contributed. She'd even started tutoring kids at the same Bronx center where Matteo volunteered, though they never worked the same shift. She didn't want to make things awkward. She just wanted to help. Matteo, meanwhile, had saved enough to buy his own car, a used sedan, nothing fancy but reliable. He'd returned the Rolls-Royce keys one quiet afternoon, placing them gently on the billionaire's desk during a brief visit to the community center's main office. The man had nodded, said nothing, and handed him a new envelope. Inside was a scholarship fund application for Matteo to finish his degree in education. You're meant to teach, the note read. Not just math, but how to treat people. He hadn't said yes right away, but he hadn't said no either. His sister was home now, stronger every day, working part-time at a library. She still didn't know the full story behind the sudden relief in their finances, and Matteo never planned to tell her. Some kindnesses were better left as mysteries. Then came the evening of the annual Hope Forward Gala, a charity event hosted by the very foundation the billionaire had quietly built over the years. It wasn't flashy like the galas the young woman used to attend. No red carpets or paparazzi, just a warm room in a converted warehouse, string lights overhead, local jazz playing softly, and tables filled with teachers, nurses, social workers, and the people they served. Matteo had been invited as a mentor honoree. He wore a simple suit slightly wrinkled from the closet but clean. He didn't expect to see her there, but as he walked in, scanning the room for familiar faces, he spotted her near the back, standing alone by a table of silent auction items. She wore a modest navy dress, hair pulled back, no jewelry except small silver studs. She looked nervous. Their eyes met across the room. Neither moved at first. Then slowly she walked over. "Hi," she said, voice softer than he remembered. "Hi," he replied. A pause. Not awkward, just careful. "I read your letter," he said finally. "Thank you for writing it." She looked down, then back up. "I meant every word. And I'm sorry. Not just for that night. For all the nights before it when I didn't see people like you." He nodded. "I believe you." She took a breath. "I started social work because of you. Not to fix what I did because I can't, but to make sure I never do it again." He didn't smile, but his shoulders relaxed. "That's more than most would do." They stood in silence for a moment, the music wrapping around them like a blanket. Then she said, "I don't expect us to be friends. I don't even expect you to forgive me. But I wanted you to know I see you now." Matteo looked at her, not as the angry girl from the restaurant, but as someone trying, stumbling, learning. "That's enough," he said. Across the room near the entrance, the billionaire watched. He hadn't approached either of them. He just stood with a glass of sparkling water observing. Pride didn't show on his face, it never did, but his eyes were softer than usual. He'd spent years building companies, closing deals, moving markets. But tonight, watching two people bridge a gap that pride and privilege had carved wide open, he felt something deeper than success. He felt hope. Later, during the short program, the host called Matteo up to receive a small plaque for quiet leadership and unseen courage. As he walked to the stage, the young woman clapped, not loudly but steadily. When he returned to his seat, she was gone. But on the chair where she'd been sitting, a single white envelope rested. No name, just his initials in neat handwriting. Inside was a check, not huge, but meaningful, made out to the community center, with a note, "For the kids who deserve to be seen." He folded it carefully and tucked it into his pocket. After the gala, Matteo walked outside into the cool spring air. The city hummed around him, taxis honking, laughter spilling from bars, the distant wail of a siren. Normal life. Beautiful in its messiness, he didn't drive the Rolls anymore. He didn't need to. The real gift hadn't been the car. It had been the reminder that one act of cruelty didn't have to define a life, and one act of accountability could change too. Back at her apartment, the young woman sat by her window, journal open. She wrote, "Today I didn't think about how I looked. I thought about how I made someone feel. That's progress." And miles away in his study, the billionaire placed the original video clip, now saved on a small USB drive, into a locked drawer, not to hide it but to remember. Even the richest lessons often come wrapped in the most painful moments. The story didn't end with a grand finale or a dramatic twist. It ended the way real change usually does, with small choices, quiet apologies, and the slow, steady work of becoming better. No one became a hero overnight. No one was punished forever. They just chose day after day to do better. And in a world that often celebrates noise, that kind of quiet courage was the rarest thing of all.